Hello everyone, this is Tim from the Nano Blitz, and I want to take a minute here to tell you about my beta experience. Obviously, you can't go too much in detail, or I can't show clips, that's why you're going to see me, but I can talk about it. I can talk about some of the experience. You've already seen some of this stuff out there. I actually did a blog on our website, thenanoblitz.com, which you can go check out now if you prefer the written word or want to see a little bit more detail there. But this is just going to be a quick video talking about some of my experiences and what I thought about the beta of Madden 20 as a whole. I think the best place to start is going to be gameplay. Gameplay felt really good. It felt really good. In my opinion, the gameplay for Madden 20 is going to make it the best version of Madden to come out on this generation of consoles. I think there's still going to be some nostalgia about how the previous games played back on PS3 and PS2, or whatever the Xbox equivalent is. But for a PS4 game, Madden 20 is the best gameplay this series has had. Past trajectories were on point. They felt really good when you're throwing the ball downfield. You're able to get that ball over that linebacker's head. Those linebackers can't make those ridiculous jump plays for those picks anymore. It felt really good. I know I said that a couple times, but I can't stress it enough. The gameplay was the best gameplay I've played on Madden in a very long time. Now, given a lot more time with Madden 20, are we going to find some issues with it? That's quite possible. But from the offensive side of the ball, it felt like a whole new game. It felt night and day from Madden 19. And then even going back and playing Madden 19, I immediately noticed a bunch of little things. Player movement, just the way players get caught up on each other, get caught up on your offensive line in the running. They weren't doing that. I think one of the best experiences was a little screen pass I played. And my running back, instead of getting caught on the linemen who were dropping back into the block, actually put his hand on the player and moved around him and was able to not lose any time and still catch the ball out there in the flat. So player movement, some of those animations that are part of that felt much better. Animations don't trigger as quickly for a lot of the tackling. I never once felt myself pulled into a tackle. Went back and played Madden 19, and it was every other run play I was pulled into a tackle. Didn't happen for me in Madden 20. So playing offense felt great with one exception, and that was the pass rush. And I only say it didn't feel great because it was difficult and it was challenging, but honestly, it was necessary. Okay, the way the offense plays against the defense plays a lot like it used to. There still needs to be some improvements over there. I mean, the tackling's a little bit better, yes, but if I have all day in the pocket, I am going to carve them up regardless of who my quarterback is. So that pass rush puts a little bit more emphasis on getting the ball out of my hands. And one issue that I had with that pass rush, though, was I did not feel like my team rushed the passer as well as computer teams did. So with that in mind, that felt like a little bit of a Maddenism, so to speak, or getting Madden where the game AI plays better than your team AI plays, which, doesn't always feel great. But again, the game itself as a whole, I ended up with very, very good simulation style statistics. I gave up more sacks than I probably should have, but I feel like that was just a learning curve. That's just me figuring out the game. And if I need to, I've got sliders I can adjust some of that stuff with if my league feels like it's too much. I'm going to say, EA, don't touch the pass rush. The pass rush felt appropriate for me. Okay, I think that's all I got for gameplay to make this quick. Let's talk about franchise. At the Nano Blitz, we say we are a franchise-first podcast, and let's be honest, there's not much new in franchise. But staying on that trend of honesty, we knew that going into it, right? We were told what was going to be added to franchise, and we didn't get a chance to play QB1 in the beta mode. But let's be honest, QB1 is not franchise. QB1 is a pre-franchise opportunity. It's a pre-franchise story mode that you play through as a quarterback only. You go through that, and when you finish it, you start franchise. And what does that franchise look like? It looks exactly like franchise has always looked when you were just a player. So it's a really cool introduction. And not having played it yet, not having seen it yet, it looks cool. We'll have to see how it comes about when we actually get to play it, but it just takes you into regular franchise mode as a player. And the big difference in franchise mode, whether you're as a player, a coach, or an owner, is going to be the scenario engine. Now, the scenario engine was built to drive narrative, and narrative in sports is incredibly important, right? Storylines are important. And we've been saying this for years, right? We want it to feel more like the NFL. We want to have those cool storylines. And so a few things with Scenario Engine. Those storylines still don't get featured front and center with the news. The news is still on a back page that you have to go to. So I would love to see more implementation of Scenario Engine with news feature and the Twitter feature. Just on the main page, something where I don't have to go look for it, right? But then the scenarios that they came up with, the ones that I got to see were pretty cool. And there were a few issues with them as well, and let me explain. So the scenarios that I went through, I had second and third string wide receivers, fourth string wide receivers, a tight end come to me and say, look, you're never going to say that I am a wide receiver number one, but in the last game you got me involved. If you get me involved in this next game, I think I can prove to people that I'm going to be a top receiver in this league. The goal then was to get them either 2 touchdowns or 100 yards receiving in that next game. And if I did, they went up in development trait. Now, that was the only way I saw to increase the development trait on a player during my experience with the Madden beta. I thought it was really cool. I thought it created a really cool narrative. And then if I didn't accomplish it, the player would come back and say, well, I guess you didn't believe in me. Now, the only downside to that, there was no morale drop. That would have been, I think, a little bit more appropriate, a little bit more negative. I feel like there's not a lot of negative impact in these scenarios. One of the other scenarios I had, probably the only one with negative impact, was asking during the week in which we had a short week. So if I went from a Sunday game to a Thursday game, my offensive coordinator, who doesn't exist in the game, would come to me and say, hey, do you want to give the players a rest, or do you want to focus on practice this week? And then I would get to choose. And if I said rest, my players would get a positive morale boost. If I said practice, they'd get a negative morale boost. Now, I would have liked to seen that a little bit more in depth. If I chose practice, I would have liked to seen a morale drop, but maybe a XP increase. If I chose the other, a morale improvement, but an XP decrease for my practice sessions. I think that would be very realistic and an easy tweak for them to do. I also had a beat reporter. I think a lot of people have talked about the scenario engine. The beat reporter came to me in the preseason of the first franchise that I started, and wanted to know which side of the ball I needed more focus on. Did my offense need more focus, or my defense need more focus? And if I said my offense needed more focus, then my defense had a morale improvement. So that was a cool thing. The problem is, in that franchise, I went through 3 seasons, was starting my 4th season when the beta ended. I started 2 other franchise modes to check out other little things with different teams, was trying out some of the relocation, which, by the way, there's nothing new in relocation either. But that was the only time the beat reporter came to me. She only came to me in the preseason of my first season in the first franchise mode that I started. And my other 2 or 3 franchise modes, not a thing was said to me. And in my additional seasons, not a thing was said to me from the beat reporter. So if the beat reporter is going to be front and center there, maybe that needs to be more consistent. Maybe she needs to ask me more questions. And then the big thing that you get in Scenario Engine over and over again is your coordinators coming to you that are asking you, how you want to deal with XFactor players when you have to play them that week. And that was pretty cool. A few issues with it, though. They give you 3 options on how you want to deal with them. Do you want to ignore them? Do you want to try to shut them down? Or do you just want to try to contain them? And those were really vague offerings, and you didn't know what you were committing to until you chose it. And then your rewards would vary depending on what you chose. I would have liked for them to have spelled out a little bit better before I chose my options. What does it mean to contain them? What does it mean to shut them down? What's the difference between those two? Because the casual player, or the player who maybe doesn't interpret those terms the same way as someone else. I mean, there are plenty of hardcore players that might interpret those phrases differently than the way EA developers did. So giving me a little idea of what I'm agreeing to before I agree to it, I think would be a positive improvement. So as a whole, Scenario Engine left me wanting a little bit more. But I also, I've said this on Twitter, I think, looking back, but what more did I expect, right? So Antonio Brown doesn't request a trade every season. That's a once every few years type of thing. And I only got through about 3 seasons with a singular franchise. Other people, I don't think, got through very many seasons either. A lot of people got through 1 season, 2 seasons, or 3 seasons like myself, because it was a very short beta. So with that in mind, what did we expect? Should we have had players requesting trades every year, or were these guys responding to how we played the game, right? If my star players are getting the ball quite a bit, then are they going to request a trade? Probably not. There's a few things there that could probably need a little bit of balance. And while this sounds like a kind of a negative review on Scenario Engine, I can't stress enough how important I think Scenario Engine is going to be long term. We already know that they want to try to update it throughout the season. We already know they want to try to do live content with it. I believe that creating a narrative in franchise mode is a huge foundational step to improving this game. And while franchise needs more, it needs the features that FIFA has. It needs the features that NHL has. I mean, we just saw what NHL 20 is going to get. Franchise mode Madden needs that. And the guys over at Tiburon need to be on the phone with the guys up in EA Canada saying, how did you accomplish this? But with all that being said, that narrative piece could be so big for this. So if they continue to tweak it, tune it, I think that's going to be a huge thing. A couple other things in franchise mode: contracts felt better. Players wanted more guaranteed money. I thought that was a really big improvement, because that really changes the way you build your team. You can't sign a player with a huge signing bonus and then turn around and trade them and not expect a large cap penalty. I know there are guys in my league that are not going to benefit from that, and I'm happy about that, to be honest. But it makes you be a little bit more specific with who you're signing and why you're signing them. But again, signing players and trading for players, not a lot of great feedback. It's still pretty random. It still feels like you just got to get that highest point total in free agency to get somebody signed to your team. So would like to see a little bit more of a conversation piece with the coach and the player on that. So that's it for franchise. Like I said, it still needs a lot of work, but I think Scenario Engine, watch for that to be a big thing. Watch for that to be cool, and I hope EA keeps it around and really continues to tweak and improve it, because it could be a really, really foundational piece to creating narrative in a sports game. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about XFactors and Superstars. So there were a couple things in the game that, for me, felt really awesome with the XFactors and Superstars. So XFactor players have special zone abilities, right? And I know some people are a little bit upset about how those play out. The truth is, I felt like they felt really good in the gameplay. I think you can make an argument around whether or not a Superstar player or an XFactor player's ability prevents an AI defense from getting a pick, regardless of how they threw the ball. But I think you can make an argument that that's how you create sim statistics at the same time. Because let's be honest, if you're playing as Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to make the decisions Aaron Rodgers would make. So that Aaron Rodgers is never going to be as good as the real Aaron Rodgers, unless you turn it on arcade mode and turn down the difficulty. Okay, so XFactors themselves felt really good. Players didn't get their XFactor abilities very often in my games. They would get them here and there, and then they'd get a couple plays, and then I'd learn how to shut them down. So it's a really cool thing to make players feel different than other players. Gives them a little bit more personality, and when you're doing strategy, it really makes you think about where you're going to put the ball on the field. When you see an XFactor like Bobby Wagner, that's going to change how I run the ball, where I throw the ball against the Seahawks, as opposed to if I'm playing just against a group of no-name linebackers, right? The Superstars and their abilities, I think I'm surprised more people don't have a problem with those, because those are active all the time. But again, it didn't feel overpowered to me. Those players just seemed to play better. I heard some other commentators talk about how it made Tom Brady one of the best quarterbacks, despite his inability to run. So I think that's what this game has needed to differentiate players, and I think it's very similar to how games like 2K are doing it with their franchise mode with badges. I feel like this is a great attempt to make players feel different and to have to account for different players, and I thought it worked out really well. One of the things that I loved in franchise mode too was when I went out and I did a draft. I drafted a player who was a superstar or an XFactor player. And what's cool about these rookies is you have to play 500 downs with that player before you know whether or not they're an actual XFactor or just a superstar. And I say just a superstar, but they still have superstar abilities, so that's still a big deal. The league that I did it with, I was using the San Diego Chargers, and I drafted a quarterback late in the first round to be the heir apparent to Phillip Rivers. And when I found out that he was either an X-Factor or a superstar player, and I knew I had to play him for 500 downs to know the difference, I immediately had this conundrum. This guy was supposed to sit on the bench for a year, right, and develop, but is he going to get 500 downs in one season sitting on the bench? Probably not, so I immediately had this temptation of putting in my new young player to see how good he could possibly be, which is, I think, what a lot of owners go through in real life when we see them trying to pull that trigger on the new guys that they just spent all that money on drafting, where the coach wants to maybe take a more cautious approach. So that felt really great to me. So it added a whole new level of depth to developing my team and building my team. As a whole, when we put all that stuff together, and there's a lot of stuff that I didn't touch on, and it has been it's already been like 2 weeks since I've played the game, but I'm really looking forward to Madden 20 coming out. And I truly believe that Madden 20 is going to be the best version of Madden on this generation of console. I don't think any of the other Maddens compare. If you look at the franchise mode, yes, franchise mode needs a lot more, but this is the deepest franchise mode we've had since, Madden 12? So it still is going the right direction. It just has taken way too long to get to where it is, and still has a lot longer to go to get to where it should be. But these are solid improvements of franchise mode, and things like X-Factor, superstar traits, things like changing up the contracts, improving the contract structures. No, they're not perfect, but they are better. And the scenario engine, guys, I think scenario engine is going to be a big thing. I think it really creates a simulation experience. I think it really creates narrative in my franchise mode. And then at the end of the day, you have to want to play the games. And that's the problem we've had with Madden 18, Madden 19, is after a couple months, you don't want to play the game anymore because the gameplay feels awful. Well, Madden 20 felt great, and I really am hopeful that it's going to feel great throughout the life cycle of the game. If it stays great throughout the life cycle of Madden 20, then we're going to see, I think, reviews are going to come in. It's going to be the best version of this game that we've seen in a long time. So guys, those are my thoughts on it. Maybe you have different thoughts. Feel free to share those with us. Go to our website, thenanoblitz.com, to catch some of our podcasts and see some of the blog posts that we put up. But I'd love to know your thoughts on it. If you want to give us a like and a subscribe, we would appreciate that as well. But thanks for watching. You guys have a good day.